Later, after the dishes were washed and the children were settling down for the night, Prudence made her final rounds. She checked on each child, adjusting blankets, smoothing hair, offering the same whispered blessing she'd given them since they were babies. In Grace's room, she paused. The 11-year-old was already growing tall, beginning to look more like a young woman than a child. "Mama," Grace whispered in the darkness. "Yes, sweetheart. Do you think my birth mama would be proud of me?" Prudence sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing Grace's dark hair. "I think Eleanor would be amazed by the beautiful, kind, strong young woman you're becoming. I think she'd be grateful that you were loved and cared for and given every opportunity to thrive. And you think she knows that I love you too, that you're my real mama, even if you didn't birth me?" Prudence's throat tightened with emotion. "I think she knows that love doesn't require blood. I think she knows that the best gift she could have given you was a father who loved you enough to fight for your life and the chance to grow up in a family that chose you. I'm glad Papa came that night," Grace said sleepily. "So am I, baby girl, so am I." The story of the Crawford family became part of local legend, told and retold throughout the Colorado Territory and beyond. It was a story about the power of compassion, about how ordinary people could become heroes simply by opening their hearts when someone knocked on their door in desperate need. But for Prudence and Josiah, for Grace and Thomas and all their children, it was simply the story of how their family began, not with a marriage or a birth, but with a moment of desperate need met by boundless love. He came begging for milk for his twins. She fed the babies and became the mother they needed. And in doing so, she discovered that sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones built not by blood, but by choice, by the decision to love without condition, to fight for children who need fighting for, and to open your heart even when it means changing your entire life. In the end, that October night in 1847 didn't just save the babies' lives. It created a legacy of love that would echo through generations. A reminder that home isn't just a place, it's the people who choose to love you, to care for you, to claim you as their own, no matter how you came to be part of their story. The Colorado mountains kept their secrets, but they also kept the Crawford family safe and strong. And in the family cemetery, years later, two headstones would stand side by side. Eleanor Crawford, beloved wife and mother, and Prudence Crawford, beloved wife and mother. Different women, different times, but united in their love for the same children, the same family, the same enduring legacy of what it truly means to be a mother. Now that you've watched the full story, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate it out of 10 in the comments. Your thoughts help us improve and ensure we're bringing you the kind of storytelling you truly enjoy. During those long, dark hours, barriers began to fall. Josiah told stories of his childhood in Missouri, of the dreams that had brought him west. Prudence shared memories of Samuel, of the love she'd thought she'd never find again. They worked together, caring for the children, trading off night feedings, sharing the endless tasks of keeping a household running. "I never thought I'd feel this again," Josiah said one evening as they sat by the fire. "Baby's finally asleep. Feel what? Like part of a family, like home." Prudence felt her heart skip, but she kept her voice steady. "These babies need family. All children do. I met you too. Prudence, you and Mercy, you've become." He struggled for words. "You've become what Grace and Thomas needed, but also what I needed. I just don't know if it's right to feel that way." "Eleanor's been gone for months now," Prudence said gently. "Grief doesn't have a schedule, but neither does healing. The heart knows what it knows." Christmas came quietly to their Snowden cabin. Josiah had carved simple wooden toys for the children, a horse for Thomas, a doll for Grace and Mercy. Prudence had managed to make a small cake with precious sugar and eggs from their stores. "Merry Christmas, little ones," she whispered, looking down at the three babies sleeping peacefully in their beds. Thomas and Grace had grown so much, their faces now round and healthy, their eyes bright with curiosity about the world around them. "Merry Christmas, Prudence," Josiah said softly from behind her. She turned to find him standing close, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Merry Christmas, Josiah. I have something for you." He pulled a small carved wooden object from his pocket. "It ain't much, but it was a dove, wings spread in flight, carved with exquisite detail. "Josiah, it's beautiful. Doves mate for life," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're symbols of peace, of home." He paused, gathering courage. "Eleanor told me once that if something happened to her, she wanted me to find happiness again. She said a good woman would make a good mother to our children." Prudence's breath caught. "Josiah, I'm not asking you to replace Eleanor. No one could do that. But I'm asking if you might consider, if you might think about making this arrangement permanent, not just for the babies, but for us, all of us." Prudence looked around the cabin at Mercy sleeping peacefully, at the twins who had grown strong under her care, at this man who had stumbled into her life when she thought her heart was closed forever. "I've been thinking about it since that first night," she admitted. "These children, they've made us a family whether we planned it or not." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." Their wedding took place in February, performed by Circuit Rider Johnson. When he made his winter rounds, the ceremony was simple, just the two of them, 3 babies, and Mrs. Henderson as witness. But when Josiah slipped Samuel's wedding ring, which Prudence had offered, onto her finger, and she gave him a simple band carved from mountain pine, it felt as sacred as any cathedral service. "Do you, Josiah Crawford, take Prudence to be your lawfully wedded wife, to love and honor, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, till death do you part?" "I do." "Do you, Prudence Whitman, take Josiah to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and honor, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, till death do you part?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I pronounce you husband and wife." Spring brought new challenges and new joys. The family, for that's what they'd become, made the decision to stay at Prudence's cabin rather than move to Josiah's ranch. The location was better protected from harsh weather, and it had become home to all of them. Grace and Thomas took their first steps that spring, tottering around the cabin on unsteady legs, while Mercy, now walking confidently, appointed herself their guardian and guide. The sight of the 3 children playing together filled the cabin with laughter that had been absent too long. "Look at them," Prudence said one evening, watching the children play while she prepared supper. "You'd never know they weren't all born to this family." "Maybe they were," Josiah replied, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "Maybe this is exactly how it was supposed to be." As summer arrived, visitors began stopping by the Crawford cabin more frequently. Word had spread about the woman who'd saved the Crawford twins, and Prudence found herself caring for other children whose mothers were ill or had passed away. She never turned anyone away, and Josiah never complained about the extra mouths to feed. "You've got a gift," he told her one evening after they'd settled a colicky baby whose mother was recovering from difficult labor. "Children just naturally trust you. Children know who'll fight for them," Prudence replied, smoothing the baby's blanket. "They know who sees them as precious instead of burden." By autumn of 1848, exactly 1 year after that desperate pounding on her door, the Crawford family had grown in ways none of them could have imagined. Grace and Thomas were healthy, thriving toddlers who called Prudence Mama without hesitation. Mercy had embraced her role as big sister with the seriousness only a 2-year-old could muster, and Prudence was expecting again a child who would be born into the family they'd built from desperation and love. "Do you ever regret it?" Josiah asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the children play in the yard. "Taking us in, changing your whole life?" Prudence considered the question, looking out at their small homestead. The garden was thriving, the cabin was full of laughter, and 3 healthy children were proof that love could indeed work miracles. "I regret that Eleanor couldn't see how beautiful her children became," she said finally. "I regret that Samuel never got to meet them, but regret taking you and never. Even when Grace had the fever last month and you didn't sleep for 3 days, especially then. That's what mothers do. We fight for our children, no matter what. All our children," Josiah said, reaching over to take her hand. "All our children," she agreed. As winter approached again, Prudence often found herself thinking about that October night when desperation had knocked on her door. She'd opened it expecting trouble and found instead the pieces of a family that needed assembling. Grace and Thomas weren't born to her body, but they'd been born to her heart the moment she'd held them, the moment she'd decided to fight for their lives. The children never knew any other mother than Prudence. As they grew, they heard stories about Eleanor, their birth mother, who'd loved them enough to make their father promise to save them. But Prudence was the one who'd kissed scraped knees, who'd taught them their letters, who'd sung them to sleep through countless nights. "Tell us again about the night Papa came," Grace would request. Curled up in Prudence's lap by the fire, it was snowing. Prudence would begin, and the wind was howling like a lonely wolf. "I heard this terrible pounding on the door, and Papa was there with babies," Thomas would add excitedly, "to tiny babies who needed someone to love them." Prudence would continue, "The smallest, most precious babies I'd ever seen, and you fed us," Grace would finish triumphantly. "I fed you, and you grew strong, and you became my babies forever." Years passed, and the story became family legend. Neighbors would tell it as an example of frontier kindness, of how good people took care of each other in hard times. But for the Crawford family, it was simply the story of how they'd found each other. Grace grew into a spirited young woman with her mother Eleanor's dark hair and her mother Prudence's compassionate heart. Thomas became a strong, steady young man who inherited his father's work ethic and his stepmother's gentle way with children. Mercy remained the responsible big sister, fiercely protective of her younger siblings. The baby Prudence had been carrying that first winter became Elizabeth, followed by 2 more children in the years that followed. The cabin was expanded, then eventually replaced with a proper house as the family and Josiah's ranching operation grew. But they never forgot that October night in 1847, when desperation and compassion had collided in the wilderness to create something beautiful. "You know what I think?" Prudence said to Josiah on their 10th wedding anniversary, watching their children play in the yard. Grace was now 11, Thomas 10, Mercy 12, Elizabeth 9, and the 2 youngest, Samuel and Eleanor, named for the parents who'd brought them all together, were 7 and 5. "What's that?" "I think Eleanor and Samuel arranged this somehow. To people who loved their children enough to want them cared for, even after they were gone. You think they're watching? I think they're smiling." Prudence leaned against her husband's shoulder. 6 healthy, happy children, a good life, a family built on love instead of just blood. What more could any parent want? As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the Crawford family gathered for supper. The table was long now, built to accommodate their growing household, and the frequent visitors who still came seeking Prudence's help with their children. Before they ate, as was their custom, Josiah offered thanks. "Lord, we're grateful for this food, for this family, for the roof over our heads. We're grateful for Eleanor, who gave us Grace and Thomas. We're grateful for Samuel, who gave us Mercy. We're grateful for the night that brought us all together, and for every day since." "Amen," came the chorus of voices around the table. Colorado Territory, 1847. The desperate pounding on Prudence Whitman's cabin door shattered the mountain silence. Like thunder before a storm, through the frosted window, she glimpsed a man's silhouette swaying against the bitter wind, clutching something precious to his chest. When she opened the door, what she saw would haunt her forever: a stranger with hollow eyes, holding to tiny bundles, begging not for gold or shelter, but for something far more precious: milk for his dying twins. The autumn of 1847 had been cruel to the Colorado Territory. Early snows trapped families in their cabins, and provisions ran thin faster than anyone expected. Prudence Whitman had learned to live with hardship since her husband Samuel perished in a mining accident 2 years prior, leaving her alone with their infant daughter. Little Mercy died at 26. Prudence had weathered more storms than most women twice her age. Her hands bore the calluses of chopping wood, her back ached from hauling water, and her heart carried the weight of raising a child alone in the unforgiving wilderness. Yet she had managed to keep her small cabin warm, her garden productive, and her milk flowing strong for Mercy. That October evening, as wind howled through the pines and rattled her shutters, Prudence sat by the fire mending Mercy's tiny dress. The baby slept peacefully in her wooden cradle, her small chest rising and falling in the gentle rhythm that had become Prudence's lullaby. The pounding came sudden and violent. Bam, bam, bam. Prudence's needle froze mid-stitch. In these mountains, unexpected visitors after dark rarely brought good news. Bandits roamed the territory, preying on isolated homesteads. She reached for Samuel's old rifle, her palms slick with sweat. "Please," came a voice through the door, raw with desperation. "I ain't here to harm nobody. My babies, they're dying." The anguish in the stranger's voice cut through her fear. Prudence approached the door cautiously, rifle ready but pointed. "Down. Who are you? What do you want?" "Name's Josiah Crawford. I got twin babies, ma'am. Their mama. She didn't make it through the birthing. Been 3 days since they had milk. Please, if you got any mercy in your heart." Prudence's breath caught. She knew the Crawford name. She'd heard tell of a young couple who'd settled near Willow Creek, about 15 miles north. The woman had been expecting come winter. Against every instinct for self-preservation, Prudence unlatched the door. The man who stumbled into her cabin looked like death itself. Josiah Crawford was tall and broad-shouldered, but grief had carved him hollow. His clothes hung loose, his beard was unkempt, and his eyes held the wild look of a man who'd stared into the abyss. In his arms, wrapped in what had once been clean blankets, were two tiny forms. "Lord have mercy," Prudence whispered. Josiah fell to his knees, extending the bundles toward her with shaking hands. "They ain't moved much since yesterday. I tried giving them water, tried cow's milk from the Hendersons, but they just keep getting weaker." Prudence set the rifle aside and knelt beside him. The babies were so small, so still. Twins born too early, their faces gaunt with hunger. One had stopped crying altogether, a terrible sign. The other mewed weakly, like a kitten lost in the cold. "How long since their mother passed?" Prudence asked, gently taking the weaker baby. "For days now. The birthing. There was so much blood. I tried everything, but she..." Josiah's voice broke. "Name was Eleanor. Sweetest woman God ever made. She made me promise to save the babies if something happened to her." Prudence examined the infant in her arms, a tiny girl, with wisps of dark hair and skin like parchment. "So fragile, yet still fighting. Have you eaten anything? Don't matter about me. It matters if you want to take care of these children." Prudence stood, the baby still in her arms. "Sit by the fire. I'll make coffee and see what I can do." The next hour was a blur of desperate activity. Prudence warmed milk she'd been saving for Mercy, testing drops on her wrist until the temperature was perfect. The stronger twin, a boy, took to the improvised feeding with eager desperation. The girl was more difficult, barely responding to the milk touching her lips. "Come on, little one," Prudence whispered, stroking the baby's cheek. "Fight for me." Josiah watched from the chair, his large hands wrapped around a steaming coffee cup. "I don't even know what to call them." Eleanor wanted to wait until they were born healthy. "They need names to fight with," Prudence said. "Something strong." She looked at the boy in Josiah's arms, now suckling hungrily from the makeshift bottle. "He's got the look of determination about him." "What about Thomas? It means twin." Josiah nodded. "Thomas Crawford. Eleanor would have liked that. And this little fighter." Prudence gazed down at the girl, who had finally begun taking tiny sips of milk. "Grace. She'll need God's grace to see her through." As the night wore on, Prudence worked tirelessly to keep the babies fed and warm. Josiah told her the story between feedings, how he and Eleanor had married just 2 years ago, how they dreamed of building a ranch, raising a family, how everything had shattered in a single, blood-soaked night. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted as dawn light began filtering through the windows. "I'm a rancher, not a nursemaid. These babies need a woman's touch." Prudence looked down at little Grace, now sleeping peacefully in her arms. The baby had taken more milk as the night progressed, and color was returning to her tiny face. Across the room, Mercy had awakened and was watching the scene with curious eyes. "The Henderson place you mentioned, they have a milk cow." "Yes. MAM, good neighbors. But cow's milk ain't the same as mother's milk for babies this young." Mrs. Henderson said as much herself. Prudence knew he was right. She'd heard stories of babies who failed to thrive on cow's milk, especially ones born too early. These twins needed something cow's milk couldn't provide. "I can nurse them," she said quietly. Josiah's head snapped. Up, ma'am, I'm still nursing Mercy. I have milk to spare. She met his eyes directly. But I can't do it from 15 miles away. You'd have to bring them here regular like, or you'd have to stay. The cabin fell silent except for the crackling fire and the soft breathing of babies. Josiah stared into his coffee cup as if it held answers to impossible questions. I can't ask that of you. You don't even know me. I know you're a father trying to save his children. I know you loved your wife enough to promise her you'd keep them alive. Prudence shifted Grace to her other arm. And I know what it's like to face this wilderness alone. Over the following days, an unusual arrangement took shape. Josiah would arrive each morning with the twins, spend the day helping with chores, while Prudence cared for all 3 babies, then return to his ranch each evening to tend his animals. It wasn't ideal, but it kept the babies fed and gave them the attention they desperately needed. Thomas proved to be the hardier of the twins, growing stronger each day. Grace remained delicate, requiring more frequent feedings and constant vigilance. Prudence found herself waking several times each night to check on her breathing, to ensure she was warm enough. You're getting attached, Josiah observed one afternoon as he watched Prudence rock Grace while Mercy played at her feet. It's hard not to. She's such a fighter. Eleanor always said she hoped our children would be fighters. Guess Grace gets that honest. As October melted into November, their routine became as natural as breathing. Josiah proved handy with repairs the cabin desperately needed, fixing loose boards, reinforcing the roof before winter set in earnest. In return, Prudence provided not just milk for his children, but the motherly care they needed to thrive. Mercy, now 8 months old, seemed to enjoy having the babies around. She would crawl over to their makeshift beds, patting them gently, with chubby hands, babbling in her baby language as if trying to comfort them. Look at that, Josiah said one evening, watching Mercy share her favorite wooden rattle with Thomas. She's already being a big sister. Children know things we adults forget, Prudence replied. Nursing Grace, they know about love without condition. But their arrangement couldn't last forever. Winter was coming hard, and the daily journey between ranches would soon become impossible. Snow had already begun falling in earnest, and Josiah's evening departures grew later and later as he helped prepare the cabin for the cold months ahead. Storms coming in tonight, he said one December evening, looking out at the heavy clouds. Might be the last time I can make it back for a few days. Prudence felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The babies can't go 3 days without nursing. Grace especially, I know. Josiah's jaw tightened. Maybe I could take them to the Hendersons. Mrs. Henderson might. Mrs. Henderson has her own family to worry about, and her youngest is already weaned. Prudence stood, still holding Grace. There's only one solution. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Prudence looked him straight in the eye. Stay the winter, all of you. The cabin's small, but it's warm and sturdy. Come spring, when the babies are stronger, we can figure out what comes next. The blizzard that hit that night sealed their fate. Snow piled 6 feet high against the cabin walls, and the wind howled like a living thing. For 3 days, they were trapped inside together, Prudence, Josiah, and 3 babies who had no understanding of the storm raging outside.